Yes, indeed, the sounds of White Lion with Transformers. There was absolutely no reason not to play that track, at least not that I can come up with anyway. It's cold in here. I'm mildly dehydrating, but I'm fine. Honest, I'm not going to collapse in a heap. This is Blue Please here on WoW Radio with myself, Total Biscuit. Right. Okay. An interesting topic, a topic of some debate and some consternation, as it were. Now, why still play WoW? Why do we still play WoW? It's an interesting question. Now, the question is, more specifically, why do we play WoW as opposed to other games? I mean, here's an example. Recently, the staff have been playing EvE Online, okay? I'm not into that. I don't like EvE Online for various reasons. I think it's pretty much a glorified spreadsheet, which is the opinion of several people, quite frankly. I think the requirements to get into it are too high, in the sense that it's too goddamn difficult and daunting for newer players. I believe that some people have got themselves into such an unattainably high state, and bearing in mind that it is something of a PvP-orientated game rather than PvE, that they are inconceivably, impossibly difficult to kill, and therefore have free reign. And that's always a bad thing. It's the same concept that breaks stuff like Archlord. Like, ooh, there's an Archlord, and now he kills everybody. Good game. Well, I like to do something of a comparison between the two, and try and work out exactly why people are playing WoW as opposed to EvE Online. Let's face it, EvE has some pretty good things going for it. Let's do some comparisons, shall we? Okay. Here's a start. The PvE aspect. Now, there is not a massive amount of PvE content within EvE Online. It's mainly PvP. It's a lot of... what's the way to put it? It's player-orientated, player-created content. Now, you look at that, and then you compare it to, say, WoW. WoW is primarily a PvE game, as opposed to a PvP one. The actual player interaction as such is very, very minimal. It's, again, the essence of PvE, player versus environment. You could even have a game where no violence was committed between players and players, and you could still have a player versus player game. It's like saying a stock market challenge game would not be a player versus player game. Of course it is. If you're going up against other players, it doesn't matter if you're not shooting them out of the sky with a missile. It's still player versus player. Now here, it's player versus environment. It pretty much is all the way through. PvP is a mild distraction from the primary aim of the game, which is PvE. In leveling, you are going up against the environment. You are questing. You do not level up by PvP. Okay? That's a pretty obvious statement, but again, it just emphasizes the point. Now, in EvE, it's completely different. You are dealing with a player-run market, you are dealing with even player-run sectors, and you're dealing with the idea that someone can come along, blow you up, and you will have a significant penalty for it. Significant penalty. Now, if someone kills you here, all you've got is a issue of time. It's a little bit different in EvE. So, let's segue on to PvP. Now, I'm going to say EvE has significantly better PvP. Why? Because it's a PvP-orientated game. Let's look at the way that PvP actually works in that. You can pretty much shoot at anybody. Except in certain sectors, if I remember correctly. I didn't play much of EvE, but I did go and research a few things. You can shoot at people, and you can kill them. Not only can you kill them, but you can what's called pod them. You can blow up their escape pod, which will kill their character, and of course blow up their ship. Now, you can clone your character. You can buy a clone, which is certainly a very good idea. If you don't buy a clone, you lose, I believe, all the skills you were getting, or something along those lines. And of course you lose, if you die, you lose your implants, which are basically upgrades to your character stats. You've got group-based PvP, particularly in that. Fleet actions. The big fleets have things called Titans, these huge, huge spaceships, and various other things, battle cruisers, frigates, destroyers, all that kind of good stuff. And it's based pretty much around fleet action, which is fair enough, because that's how you'd expect a space-based game to be. Now, WoW is again based on group PvP, but the problem is it's meaningless. Arenas do not make for meaningful storyline-based PvP, whereas the storyline in EvE is often pretty much player-created, in the sense that you've got corporation versus corporation, whereas in a guild versus guild environment within WoW, it doesn't really work so well. What are you going to do, corpse camp them? Oh no, there's a war! It doesn't affect anything. I can just hide in an instance. Yeah, it doesn't make any blind bit of difference. Now, I was reading a rather interesting review of a ex-WoW player, and he was playing EVE Online. And he was arguing that EVE Online had much more to offer in terms of gameplay and opportunity. EVE has a true economy, for instance, which is okay, fair enough, if you like that. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that if you have a true economy, you get to the stage of some players being so unbelievably powerful that, again, you just can't do anything to them. EVE is based around... It's a capitalist simulator. It's probably fair to say, actually, that WoW is a socialist game, in the sense of that there's a lot of safety nets for people. There's a minimum standard, whereas in EVE, it's a capitalist game. People can advance so far that they are completely and totally untouchable. Now that, in my opinion, is a problem. While that is attractive to certain hardcore types, it's very niche. Exceedingly niche. It's also not an easy game to get into, necessarily. Now, let's have a look at some other elements of EVE. EVE, for instance, has no levels. It's a non-linear character progression system. I do think, to be quite honest, that as a result, it suffers greatly in comparison to WoW. Now, levels have been in RPGs for a very, very, very long time. They are a static and a particularly good mechanism, in my honest opinion, of showing a way of quantifying your character as regards to its progression. My character is level 12, yours is level 10, I progressed more than you, ha ha ha. You know, that kind of thing. That's good. Because players often need, little markers. Now, this is the watermark that I need to attain. Am I lower or higher than the watermark? Am I drowning in a sea of complete mediocrity? Or am I soaring slightly above the level of mediocrity? That's a question. And it's a good question. What's happening with it? Now, EVE's system is not based around that. Their character progression system is based around a couple of things. How much you've trained your character, as in what skills you know, and what ship you're flying. And, of course, how much money you have. As a capitalist MMO, it's based primarily around how much money you've got. Like, for instance, you can do quests, quote-unquote, jobs, as it were. And if you do a certain number of jobs, you have a chance of gaining enough reputation with a particular organisation to say, well, we will allow you to build a ship or acquire this weapon for cut price. Now, this is not necessarily, by any stretch of the imagination, something unique. It's not like in WoW, where rep gain means you can acquire something. It's static. When you reach revered with Cenarian Circle, you get X, Y, and Z. It doesn't work that way in EVE. The thing with it is that what you get given is something you can acquire anyway. Which means that you can quantify character progression specifically down to skill points and money. Now, that to me just seems a little bit stale. Some people would argue, well, it's more free-form, but just how free-form do you really want to get? The success of WoW, in my honest opinion, was because it was based on the principles of an RPG. Old school. But it took a refreshing look at it and made it accessible for people. And that's a good thing. Now, EVE has a market. There's no two ways about that. Absolutely. I'm not going to dispute that it has a market. And it's got various good elements to it. Like, for instance, the universe. You can have 30,000 plus people online at any given time. Whereas on a server, in WoW, you'll have a few thousand. That is a plus to some degree, but it's also a minus. It makes you, who are you within your own community? You can be an absolute nobody, and you may maintain that position of being an absolute nobody for a very long time. Forging your identity within WoW is significantly easier, at least within your own community. Forging it within the wider community, that's difficult. But, it's supposed to be. And I think there's something more of a community aspect to servers within WoW, these micro-communities. Something that I don't believe EVE actually shares. Now, there's a whole list of things which he claims, EVE is better than WoW, WoW is better than EVE, blah, blah, blah. Now, he says the single most important thing, which is never stated in reviews, is that in EVE Online you can be really evil, and people can be really evil back to you. You can be destroyed and even betrayed. In WoW, being evil is much more of a fashion statement. Okay, fair enough. However, you've got to bear in mind, of course, that you are, again, playing a game. Now, look at the people that play WoW. You've got people from all walks of life play WoW. People from all walks of life do not play EVE Online. Why? Because EVE Online can be a pain in the ass. Just like any other game where you can have death penalties, you can have people who are ludicrously more powerful than you completely destroy a significant amount of progress that you've made in the game just because they feel like a bastard today. That's actually not a good thing. If it were, say, a hardcore simulator designed for hardcore people, which in my opinion it is, it's designed for a certain crowd. Yes, in that sense, it's great. It's like Diablo 2 hardcore mode. It's like no one in their right mind, unless they want a really hardcore experience, just plays hardcore mode. It's labelled hardcore for a reason, but it's optional. Now, EVE, EVE does not have that. You can still have this happening, and it can make people damn miserable. Yeah, the loss of virtual property. We've seen stories about people getting so upset that they've gone and hurt people over it, or sued people, or done various other things. It's still something that you have gained, and to lose it is not a good thing at all. Now, he's arguing, this guy that's done this review, is arguing that this is a good thing about EVE. I argue that it is not. I argue that WoW actually has a significant leg up on that, because it is just a friendlier gaming experience. When I lose in a single-player game, that's fine. I don't really lose anything as such, I just reload. If I were to lose something in EVE, I can't reload. It's going to take me a significant amount of time to earn that back. And again, it's a richer get richer, poor get poorer scenario. Bad. Yeah, it's based on capitalism, which is the problem. The whole thing is damn capitalist. And if you are a capitalist with that kind of mind, you'll have fun with EVE Online. But if you're not, then what the heck are you going to do? Now, he also argues some various other things. EVE Online gives you a greater adrenaline rush. Okay, yeah. Getting killed in EVE, PvP is more thrilling because there's more at stake. But just how far do you go? I get an adrenaline rush out of PvP right now because I don't want to lose to people. It's my personal pride. I don't want to get killed. A loss of time is quite enough. Loss of possession, say if I lost gold and all that. I used to play some hardcore mods in the day. I used to play Moon, which you could lose levels and you could lose all your equipment and your gold. You really could. Heck, someone could kill you, steal everything, take your body halfway across the map and bury it. And you couldn't find it ever again. You'd have lost everything. Except for your experience, of course. Now, that's pretty damn hardcore. And I lost an awful lot with that. It's actually the reason that I quit the game, because I just couldn't deal with that. The kind of people that played were like Norwegians that sat there 20 hours a day. Now, that's fine if you're aiming for that kind of market, but EVE will never ever surpass WoW. Ever. Why will it never surpass WoW? Because it's aimed at a specific kind of market. Which has been the problem with many other MMOs, to be quite honest. Now, he also argues that EVE Online is not so time-consuming to progress. Okay, because you can train your skills offline. Okay, fair enough. Except for the fact that when you lose everything, it's damn time-consuming to get everything back. Once you've attained something within WoW, it stays there. It's pretty much a permanent fixture of your character until you, or a hacker, decides to get rid of it. That's a personal choice there. Now, someone in a bigger ship than you can decide that they want to get rid of your ship. They want to pod you. Now, yeah, you can insure yourself. That's cool, you can clone yourself. But again, what happens if that person goes on hunting for you and kills you again and again and again? You run out of money, you get, wiped down, back to square one. It is possible. It can be done. And that's a really bad thing, in my honest opinion. Now, yeah, the thing is, with WoW, it can be time-consuming. Getting rank 14 PvP, time-consuming. Doing the raiding, time-consuming. But it's optional. There are things you can do. The problem with EVE is that, well, what is there to do, really? Aside from going for this, hey, let's go and own my own sector. Let's have a big corp alliance. Let's own the biggest ship. You don't really get thrilled, at least too much, in my honest opinion, of acquiring, oh, I got a frigate today. Good game. I'm just going to blow your frigate out of the water with one missile. Now you don't have a frigate. In my opinion, that's not a great way to win a game, at least if you're trying to appeal to the masses. Now, yeah, WoW has mass appeal. Some people can argue that's a bad thing, because popularity, of course, does not necessarily mean that something is good. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't necessarily mean it's good, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad either. You can't simply say, well, that's popular, therefore the underdog's clearly better. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But again, you're missing the point. You're missing the one thing that makes WoW more accessible, and why people stay with WoW is because you can play it and not have to worry about that kind of thing. It's not aimed at a hardcore market. That's a success. But it has hardcore elements within it. They've built hardcore elements into the game, and that's something you can do. So you start off from square one, and you're not in an incredibly hostile world by any stretch of the imagination. Now, some people might call that Care Bear, but you know what? When I get home for a 40-hour week, I want to sit down and be able to play and not be worried that I'm going to lose all of my gear to some 14-year-old snot-nosed whelp who's had a bad day at school. Which is, in my opinion, why WoW is far superior to EvE. You're listening to Blue Please here on WoW Radio with myself, Total Biscuit. Here's a little bit of Nubcake news for you. Enjoy. Nubcake news! Stop that. Welcome to this week's edition of Nubcake News. Coming up later in the program, we discuss the merits of Badger Power, the new environmentally friendly but rather grumpy and prone to fleas power source for the world. Plus an exclusive look into the life and times of Gammon. Just why is he so sad? But first, recent reports by the world's leading scientists have confirmed that there is in fact nobody playing WoW anymore. The shocking failure of the Burning Crusade to sell any more than 27 copies worldwide has prompted such a severe downturn in players that many servers lie empty and dormant, and the surviving servers also lie empty and dormant because nobody is playing anymore. What? We're expecting some kind of dramatic revival? No, everyone is dead. Everyone is dead, Dave. This sudden exodus has caused a huge impact on the global economy. Sales of Mountain Dew and Hot Pockets have plummeted, making displaced workers resort to cannibalism, which they curiously found tastier than Hot Pockets. The once powerhouse economy of China has unprecedentedly imploded, leaving approximately 50 million gold farmers out on the streets, kicking their heels and lagging messily all over the place. The website eBay has issued a statement blaming Blizzard's failures for a sudden downturn in business and asking golden account sellers to come back please, all is forgiven, honest. And what of the players? Economists were surprised to find that there were suddenly absolutely no jobs anywhere on the planet. Investigators found entire companies now staffed with ex-WoW players communicating entirely in a bizarre lingo. Stock markets were in upheaval as the Dow Jones Index was flooded with requests which read WTB Goldplex and WTS 70 Rogue, lease gear named Pure Cold Killer, PvP server. Governments the world over are in panic and called on the services of the A-Team to assist them in their plight. Sadly, the A-Team doesn't in fact exist, so they instead turn to a slightly more sensible source, game designers, who they have tasked with designing a brand new MMO to accept those errant WoW players who they state are still on our jobs and white women. The development of this is shrouded in secrecy, but nothing is outside the reach of Nubcake News. Posing as a pleasing but forgettable potted plant, our inside man is, well, inside, with this exclusive design meeting. I call to order the first meeting of this, the ultimate gathering of MMO developers. We have designers from such greats as Dark and Light, Planetside Core Combat, and Fangtooth from the now defunct World of Warcraft.
Fangtooth, he was a designer?
Why, yes, he was responsible for the Aldor lift. I heard the giggles whenever someone falls down. Now, we must look at the reasons as to why WoW failed so badly before we can possibly design a WoW beta.
Indeed. Let's look at the facts. Blizzard introduced an expansion with brand new content, amazing new zones, better quest lines, thousands of new items, new instances, raid encounters, meaningful PvP, and flying mounts.
Yes, they did, and that's why it failed.
I'm not following your logic, sir.
People don't want these kind of things. They need something with panache, something with feeling.
I think I understand where you're coming from. You're basically saying that the new content was nothing more than reskinned rehashes of something that was already in the game and lacked soul.
No, don't be ridiculous. If it were that, then surely it would have succeeded. No, we need to look at the few elements that made WoW feel alive.
Meaningless world PvP, laggy events, frequent downtime?
No, Hogger!
Hogger?
May I present, ladies and gentlemen, the wave of the future, Hogger, the MMO.
Hogger?
Of course, what a fabulous character to build an MMO around. We see all of these surefire failures in development such as Warhammer, World of Darkness, Firefly, all useless licenses with no flavour, guaranteed flops. But with Hogger we can recapture the essence of the MMO.
You're going to have to enlighten me, sir. I don't really understand how Hogger could be developed into an entire game.
It's quite simple. When players roll their characters in World of Hogger, they get a broad choice of character classes.
So we're going to vary somewhat from the old mage, priest, warrior generic slots towards something a little bit more adventurous?
Absolutely. I've developed concepts for 4 primary classes. Angry Hogger, Sad Hogger, Happy Hogger, and Amused Hogger.
Aren't those simply emotional states of the same character?
Didn't you hear what I said earlier? We need panache, we need feeling, we need soul, emotion, we need to cover all possible facets in World of Hogger.
Well, I do see your point. How is character customization going to work?
Hats.
Hats?
Of course! We couldn't in all good conscience change the essence of the Hogger character, it's simply too perfect. However, we will allow players to wear different coloured and styled hats to denote individuality.
Yes. Character distinction and individuality are important. They allow players to find an essence of self.
Which is exactly why all of our players will belong to the Hogger Collective, a sort of hive mind, if you will.
Surely that would have a negative impact on the community.
Nonsense! The hive mind is perfect and will not allow such thoughts to even enter the minds of players. Now tell me, in your opinion, why did WoW initially succeed?
Accessibility, learning curve, distinctive visual styles, strong background lore, a successful franchise, lack of frustration and death penalties. Sir, this is going to be tough to emulate.
Exactly, which is why we're not going to.
Are you suggesting we innovate?
Language! Didn't your mother ever teach you manners? You will not use that word in this place again. No. We must instead take everything that made WoW bad and combine it together to form one glorious whole. It's elementary mathematics. A negative multiplied by a negative always equals a positive.
So what you're saying is we need to base World of Hogger entirely on elementary mathematics.
Exactly. Players must solve basic mental arithmetic in order to progress. There will be no mobs within the game, since no one can stand against the might of Hogger, and anyone bringing harm to the Hogger will result in ritual cleansing with fire.
I see the logic behind this. So which elements of WoW will we be incorporating into this new MMO?
Meeting stones, in their original format. They were ruined in the Burning Crusade by a foolish design decision that made them remotely useful. This is unacceptable. By combining meeting stones with the other negative aspect of WoW, aldermen, we can form an MMO for the ages.
I see. So if we were, for instance, to base the entire MMO inside Alderman...
Brilliant! It cannot fail. So here is our design document. Players roll their Hogger and set out into the confusing and deliberately convoluted and frustrating world of Alderman in search of meeting stones, which they must acquire via the use of basic arithmetic. Along the way, they meet other Hoggers who look disturbingly similar, save for different coloured hats.
But what about endgame?
This is the ultimate reason as to WoW failed in the first place. Endgame is far too depressing. The name implies that there is an end. MMOs cannot have an end. It is inconceivable. Therefore, we shall rename Endgame.
To what?
Hello Kitty Adventure Island.
Now, what exactly is the logic behind that decision?
Logic is far too depressing. We should be replacing it with Hello Kitty Adventure Island.
Suddenly it all makes sense. Call the world president. We have his MMO ready.
The president has been replaced with Hello Kitty Adventure Island. Thank the Lord in heaven we are saved from this horrible situation of employed gamers and China actually having to make itself useful for a change. And here I thought this world was going to implode. This has been No Cake News. Good night.